episode of Mind the Gap with me, Emma Turner, and Tom Sherrington. Today we're going to be reflecting on our wonderful interview with Mary Myatt. So much wonderful insight and expertise from Mary in our interview with her. Tom's going to talk you through some of the research and reading around his new course, Teaching for Distinction. And then we're going to be getting to grips with some of the hot topics of the moment, including examinations, public examinations in the UK, quality assurance systems during COVID, and then examining what it's like for head teachers and senior leaders in schools in the UK at the moment. So it's been a few days, Tom, since we interviewed Mary. What have you been thinking about?
Well, I've been thinking that I enjoy it when you tweet about it and you say something like, I predict a Myatt, which I enjoy because I'm a big fan of the Kaiser Chiefs, and that's a joke that always goes down with me. So that's one of the things I've been thinking. But also, I think it's great that in our world we have people that command enormous respect, and they sort of embody everything that's sort of grown up and kind of intelligent about the teaching profession. And that's Mary, because she has this way of dealing with difficult issues, but in a way which embraces diverse opinion, but without becoming polemical or biased in one way. Even though she's got very strong views, she recognises the need for debate and exploration. And I don't think I think she's brilliant for that. She's totally inspiring for me in that regard, that she knows a lot. She's got a strong opinions, but at the same time, she's not sort of ramming it down your throat in this way, which puts you off. And then she just is a standard setter. That's the other I love about her. She wants things to be excellent, and she really is kind of demanding of us as people. And I think that's just wonderful. So I love hearing her talk.
I just really like the way as well that you can tell there's so much depth to what she's thinking and what she's researched and what she's found out. But then she just manages to convey it in such a succinct way with such absolute clarity and razor-sharp precision that you kind of think, why didn't I think of it like that? And it's because I'm not Mary Myatt. That's why I don't think of things like that. But she just manages to make the complex and the difficult and the potentially overwhelming seem really doable, really clear, really small steps, and really achievable. And I think that's such a talent of Mary's, that she helps and guides people's thinking with such clarity and direction that I can't recommend her highly enough, either to see, to speak, hear her speak, or to read. She's the same on the page as she is in real life. It's such a huge talent.
She's got this sort of cool kind of character, but also like her books. I mean, Back on Track, which she's published. We didn't even spend that long talking about it really, but it's just like her one before. She's written so many, but the last two, which have had the sort of element of curriculum and so on in there. The chapters are dead short. So and for me, that's just a blessing. You just go like, there's no frills, just like bosh, and then this, and then this, and this, and it's sort of clarity, but also a succinctness. And, I think that's great. But the main thing is it's her message that of kind of, I guess less is more, just strip it back, do a few things well. And I do think people need encouragement from someone that you respect and has sort of seen a lot of practice to say, you know what, it is okay to do this. It's not some weird risk.
I always come away from Mary feeling so much more confident in my own decision making, and that is a huge gift that very few people have, is to make other practitioners and other educators feel as though they are doing the right thing. So she instills huge confidence as well as an enormous amount of information as well. So she's a gift, that woman. And apparently Googled the Kaiser Chiefs after I first put I predict a Myatt, because she wasn't aware who they were, but she was like, I've been onto YouTube and had a watch of them.
Is that right? Yeah, well, I mean, one thing I'll say is that she's part of a group that I'm in, that we do these curriculum masterclasses, and she'll be doing one of her own in December. So there's an event on the 1st and 2nd of December which people can sign up for, and she's doing a talk as part of that. So people, look online for those sorts of things if you want to hear Mary speak. And she obviously takes part in lots of other training. Yeah, so that was really great. Shall I talk about the next thing then?
So, you're teaching for distinction.
Yeah, I wanted to share this because here I am in this sort of space here with my books behind me, and sitting here doing this on Monday and Tuesday this week. I did a course for a college in Oldham College, and I've been working with them for a few years now, and we've been really working hard about how to train teachers. There's about 200 tutors there. It's a big place.
Wow.
And what we've found is that, you know, we've learned a lot about how do you get ideas from research into front of people so they're engaging with the reading. And the principal there, a guy called Alan Francis, who I just think is inspirational, running this enormous organization. He phoned me about 3 years ago and he said, I want my teachers and my leaders to be really up to date on ideas and really informed. He wants them to be knowledgeable about teaching and about leadership. And from within, not just always having sort of visiting speakers and stuff. So we developed this program, and I just thought I was really, as I was delivering this sort of sessions with them, I was thinking, it's so interesting when we've encountered these ideas. We've been using the same books for 3 years, and the ideas are really deepening and linking together in a way which I thought was really interesting. And I'm just going to tell you what they were. So one of the key books is Dan Willingham's Why Don't Students Like School? And it's particularly the thing in there which is memory as a residue of thought. And as we were discussing this idea that thinking, it's so simple, but he says in there, plan your lessons so that students are thinking about what they'll think about exactly. And that feeds into so many aspects to do with questioning and whether everyone is able to think, tasks, and whether they have to think to do the task or they can just do it without thinking. Thinking about the thing you want them to learn rather than thinking about something that's kind of to do with the nature of the task, not the content. It's so powerful. So that's one. And it's just that simple idea that we came back to that over and over again. There's a great book here by David Didau and Nick Rose called What Every Teacher Needs to Know About Psychology. And in here, it's just so useful. And we found this useful as like a textbook for teachers. At the back of each chapter, it says what every teacher needs to know about X. And the sections that we were looking at particularly were about working memory and cognitive load. And it was sort of, you don't need to know that much about those things, but linking that to the Willingham, we were thinking this is really, really going well. It's just sort of all chiming together. And then finally, Dylan Williams' formative assessment, where he talks about the dynamics of a classroom. Yeah. And of course, it links to other things like Rosenshine's principles and other things which we were looking at. But we just were feeling that in every context in a college where you've got people doing bricklaying, maths, business studies, digital design, childcare, it's just so many things. These ideas really, really apply in lots of different ways. And I just was thinking it's so great to have these resources, but you have to really pull out key concepts, really cement them together and make them connect. And the last thing, growth mindset. So we were saying there's a lot of fluff about growth mindset, but when you break it into making students feel better about the fact that they can learn things because they are learning things, because they're thinking, because they're making connections, all these other people are kind of the way to how to develop a growth mindset. So we were saying, so a growth mindset is almost like an outcome. It's what you get when the learning's working, and it's a good idea. But you can't just sort of talk about growth mindset. You've got to talk about these other things and then the growth mindset. So we were thinking this is all, I don't know, I feel like these ideas coalesce so nicely into a frame for how to teach well. So I just wanted to celebrate that. You know, these books are really helping, but we needed to get people to really read them. So we were giving people chapter references, pages, and making them read them. We can talk about this later, but there's the leaders in that college, they have to do an assignment where they have to show they've read those books by writing up a literature review. And I think that's great.
And is this a course that anybody can access, Tom?
No, not at the moment. It's a course we have developed for them. And so it's their course that we are running. We call it Teaching for Distinction because in a college, the grading system in a lot of the qualifications is pass, merit, distinction. Yeah. And too many students just pass and don't get distinction. So we're trying to say, like, how do we get, but also it feels like, you know, teaching with distinction, for distinction is like the person.
Yeah.
But there's something what I found was great was the teacher's response, moving from here's some reading you might do if you've got time, to this year we've made it, no, you really have to do the reading, and there's an assignment. Actually, they felt like, you know what, good, I'm up for this. I'm being invested in here. I'm not being patronized. I'm being expected to engage as a professional. And of course, there's a workload element, but actually, we've made it fairly light touch in that sense by being really sharp. Just read this, just read that, not just chucking a whole load of whole fat books to people, but really sampling the key pages. And so I just feel like...
And it isn't a workload element if ultimately you sharpen your practice and then you will become more efficient at what you do. Then you don't have to spend as much time thinking of new and novel ways of your own to solve a problem, because actually you've now got the knowledge or the skill or the understanding or the science that underpins it to really sharpen up your own practice as well. So it may be an initial investment, but actually pays dividends in the long run.
I think so. And I tell you what, is also my first experience of full-on whole class teaching online. So I had a class of, window of people, and I did it lots of times with different groups.
Yeah.
And I had like 15, 18 people on the screen, and I was saying, so Dave, what do you think about Carol Dweck then? And it's like Dave having to go like, oh my God, I'm supposed to really know it. And then once they realized I would definitely ask them, they were really like switched on camera, and all those things people have talked about that.
Welcome to my world, Tom. Welcome to my world. I do whole class online teaching.
Well, I haven't had to do it, you see. I mean, I have to admit that I haven't had to do it myself. So it was really quite an interesting experience to have to do it. Even with adults, they have the same behaviors, like having to switch on and be present on screen takes some effort.
Oh, fantastic. So teaching with distinction, I've got a feeling that's going to come out as a new course, I reckon, Tom. I can see that one in the pipeline.
Maybe we'll see how it goes.
Right. In terms of the wider world then, in terms of being in school, we were going to talk about exams and about assessments.
Well, it's a massive issue.
Yeah.
And I mean, for people who are tuning in from the US, I mean, one of the amazing things about the English system is that we have these qualifications which all the students have to take when they're 16, and a whole bunch more at 18. They have to take exams when they're 11, which in primary schools, and they even have to do some baseline tests lower down. So there's a lot of testing goes on, and there's
aren't we the most tested country in Europe or something?
Probably. And so the question is,
sure we're the most tested and the least happy.
Well,
no, honestly, I don't know whether that's correlation causation thing, but we are one of the most tested education systems in terms of the number of exams children have to sit, yet consistently come out as one of the most unhappy.
See, I actually, this is slightly going off the topic already, but I'm actually very skeptical about happiness studies. I really am. I actually think you might actually be happier than other people. It's just the way you describe your happiness might be registered lower. So our mindset might be that we tend to think of ourselves as we ought to be happier than we are, but maybe we're actually happier than other people. It's just that they think they're happy enough. So the whole scoring system is so flawed that I just don't think it at all.
If you flip that, it's kind of, I think the measure of unhappiness, as in the measure of anxiety, depression, all of those things, is high, and that in itself says that people are not happy. Do you see what I mean? Rather than saying, "Oh, I am happy," I feel happy. You can have a measure of happiness by actually how many people are unhappy.
Possibly, but let's separate that from exams, because I personally don't feel that the whole thing. I think there's a lot said which is not proven, and people are projecting onto it. But the reason it's debated hotly. So what's happened recently? Obviously, there are two things going on at once, which I think is interesting but complicated. One is all the public exams are cancelled in the summer because of COVID, and so the schools had to submit grades where the teachers set them, which is what other countries do anyway. But that was new for us. And then the students were getting grades which were not nationally standardized. They were just what the teachers had decided to give them. And that's what we've done. And the question is, next year, we're going into this again, and there's uncertainty now about where COVID's going. so there's been a big debate about whether the exam should go ahead, and the decision has been that they will. So now there's this sort of backlash about, is that fair? Because some parts of the country have got more lockdowns than others, and so the students don't all have a uniform experience. I mean, you could argue they never have anyway. But then, so that's one debate. And the other debate is just about the nature of exams generally. So even if there was no COVID, there'd be people talking about, should we have so many exams? What should be in the exams? Should they be at 16 and not at 18? And so on. So there's a massive debate. And what I'm finding is people are linking these two things together, like the long-term, the fundamental question about exams with what should we do next year when we still have COVID? And I actually think they're totally separate debates. I really do think they're not the same. But I don't know what's your sense of it? Because obviously, we're going to talk about primary and secondary differences. What's your sense of it from someone who's not a secondary teacher, looking into that world and thinking about it from your perspective?
I'm not a secondary practitioner, as you know, but I do kind of look at it and think we have had the craziest academic year we have ever had, yet there are people saying the show must go on. And I just think if everything is gradually in a state of flux and chaos backstage, we can't expect a similar sort of performance front of house. So something's got to change, and I don't think the notional 3 weeks that's been added on this year is going to make up for the kind of the bumps that we've hit over the last few months. I mean, it seems a complete nonsense to me to say the children have had the most disrupted education of generations. The way they're being taught is completely different. Their education continues to be disrupted either by bubbles closing, staff absences. The way in which you can interact with the children is different in the classroom from the way we've always taught. And yet there being no recognition, maybe something needs to change and needs to give a little.
That's what I think
doesn't seem to stack up.
I think that's what a lot of people are feeling. But what I'm thinking is that, so I've been to a few schools this term, and I mean, it could just be a small sample, but in each one of them, and I include, say, my wife's school where she's the deputy head and they're doing the same, they're feeling like very much like, because of all the uncertainty, the best thing you can do for the students is to keep them focused on something which is the same as everyone else has had. So if you're teaching a year 11 class biology, now you want to be saying, look guys, we're just going to carry on, we're going to teach you the stuff, the exam's when it is, and you need to keep working towards that. And if we have to go off for a couple of weeks, here's the resources and here's how you carry on studying, and there'll be some lessons online.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about when we close like it's time off. We're talking about when we close, we're actually carrying on. And it's the need for the focus and the normality of that, which I think people are actually saying is helping them, not the other way around.
I get that. It's what happens at the pinch point. Actually, when it comes to that point where they're meant to be doing the exam and they're meant to be stacking up their performance and experience against previous cohorts who have had a completely different experience and different delivery, that's the point when it becomes a nonsense. I totally agree that keep kind of business as usual as much as possible, because we haven't got a plan B at the moment. There isn't something different to work towards. So keep working towards that. But as a system, as the kind of the decision makers in the system, there needs to be a recognition that those children can't be assessed against the same things that other cohorts have, because they haven't had the same experience. I mean, I know this is kind of anecdotal, but when I was doing my A-levels, I had 6 months off because I had a botched operation. Now, I still did bits and bobs at home and in the hospital school and whatever. I know my grades weren't as good as they were meant to be because I had a disrupted 6 months of being in hospital. And obviously these children aren't necessarily in hospital, but that's the same thing that's happening now, but on a massive scale. They're not having the same as previous cohorts would have done, and I don't.
Not, so you have to have there's a lot of things at play here. So there's the kind of there's the need for there's the exam as a sort of focus point for assessing your achievement in itself, but then the grade you get for that, is it comparable with other people, even never mind previous years, that's a whole other thing, but just within the year. And I think that's where people are most concerned. I think we can deal with the fact that compared with previous years, we don't do performance tables, we just sort of say within that cohort. But I think the biggest concern is if you get an A or a B, or let's use the proper, that's for A level, but at GCSE, say a grade 7 in maths, it should be the same standard as the grade 7 in maths for someone else, or in English. And an exam is the fairest way to do that because everyone takes the same exam under the same conditions. But what you can't do is level out everyone's experience. We can't just say compensate for that issue, compensate for that issue. You've got to kind of assume that by now schools have kind of got their act together with year 11, especially for keeping them going through, even if they have to shut down a little bit. I feel like that's the most fair assumption, that schools are actually teaching kids when they're at home and they're not actually stopping.
I think that's right, but I think the divide between those children who have access to technology and resources at home and those children who, those that do and those that don't, is going to impact so much more than in previous years, because you've got huge numbers of children who haven't got access to laptops, to a device, to Wi-Fi, to a supportive adult at home, or a safe and not chaotic working environment. Which
that's what Peter DeWitt was talking to us about, even from the US context. Like that's but maybe, and so what I'm hoping for is that Glenys Stacey, who's the head of the sort of interim head of Ofqual, which governs all these bodies, I think she has made noises to say that the nature of the exams, there's still time. Having said they're definitely going ahead, which I think is good, they are still saying there's still time to maybe look at, maybe there are more options, maybe students get more choice in the exam, and maybe there will be some flexibility there. So I think there will be some more changes to come through.
Because what we can't have as well is the debacle of that algorithm again.
No, I think literally universal. But from my point of view, what I feel like there is like, see, even your sense that these things are problems, which is real, it's just true. And everyone is like, so what? It's the alternatives. The alternatives are like more. People are saying, well, trust teachers. Now, I have a big issue with this. I think I think teachers should be really careful about saying it's about trusting teachers to assess the students, because in the US, where you have sort of grade point average assessments, and in Sweden, where they do something similar, there are debates about whether or not the standards are the same. And it's not about trust, it's about systems. If you don't have a system for checking that your standards are the same as mine, we don't know. I trust you and you trust me, but we can't tell. So the way that you tell is by something, a very complicated moderation system, and that takes up a lot of time and effort, and it's a big workload issue. So I don't think trusting teachers is a healthy way to frame a technical process about knowing what the standards are. And I worry whenever everyone says that we should just trust the teachers. I think, no, don't. It's not about trust, because we should be trusted anyway. But it's
also a big responsibility for a teacher. It's a huge responsibility. So if you are going to assign that grade to that child, to think, actually, this is my decision, which could affect, their future chances, or what group they go into or what set they go into. It's a massive responsibility for an individual. Yeah. Like you say, it would need to be moderated, not just for accuracy, but also to take out that kind of individual responsibility or bias, something as well.
It was fun, actually, back in March this year, when they first announced that the exams would be gone and teachers would be setting grades, a friend of ours who's a teacher, she just dropped past the house. We're socially distancing. She was standing at the end of our little gate there.
You don't have to explain it, Tom, I believe.
It was funny. She said one of her students had just heard the news, who was and her student had been quite a naughty student all year, had come up to her and said, "Miss, look, I know I've been really, really terrible, but I really was going to work really hard for these exams. So will you will you take that into account? Like, she's really trying to butter her up because she felt,
Oh gosh.
and that, that type of thing. Anyway, I think it's interesting, and my main message I say to anyone in listening to this would be, don't, think about the technicalities of it as much as the emotional side of it, because you do need to have systems which we trust, and it's the systems we have to trust, not the individual people. I think that's a mistake. But I think, actually, because we've spent a bit of time on this, I mean, another whole discussion I think we should have, and I think we should do this in the next time we do this, is talk about primary assessment, because I think there's a lot of people cross-phase, if I'm honest, who don't necessarily fully appreciate the opposite, the other. So for me, I'm gonna ask you to report back on this the next time we do this.
Okay. I could talk for days about primary assessment.
I don't get the whole debate really about the phonics checks and baseline assessments and why it's so controversial. You hear people arguing about it all the time, and for me, as a sort of examsy kind of person, I don't understand why it's controversial. I just think, yeah, test them and see what they can do. But I suspect there's a bit more to it than that.
Yeah, dig yourself a bunker for next time.
Yeah,
I'm coming for you.
Let's talk about that next time, okay? Because I think that's an interesting area to it.
Yeah, I do think primary assessment is grossly misunderstood a lot of the time, and it's a huge area. It can be really contentious. There's elements of great practice going on, and so yeah, I do think that unpicking primary assessment is a really good conversation for the next.
And the other question I'm going to ask you next time is, why do we have, if we scrap SATs, who suffers? And that's an important question, which leads us on to our next topic: quality assurance.
Oh gosh.
This is interesting. So there's a few things here. There's also like how schools do it well.
Yeah.
But also now in COVID era, where people have got a lot on their plate, should school leaders be doing walkthroughs in lessons? Should they be observing lessons? Should they be holding teachers to account for the quality of their lessons? Should they
I don't think.
What do you think?
I don't think it's yes or no. Because there are elements of QA that need to happen. For example, NQTs, they need to be supported, they need to be observed, they need to have that development of their practice, and they need to, for want of a better word, pass that NQT year. So there are elements of QA that have to happen in people to develop and people to move on. I also think that things like a Mockstead at the moment is utter madness.
What is that? Explain that for people who don't know what that is.
Mockstead. Well, Ofsted obviously is our statutory inspectorate who come in and judge the quality of provision in school. And a Mockstead is a lovely term for people who do not fake Ofsted, but a dummy run type Ofsted, and go in and go through the process in order to notionally build confidence and to unpick any sort of areas for development prior to the actual inspection. However, peer review done really well supported with trusted colleagues can be really useful. However, at the moment, in the current climate, I think that doing a Mockstead or any kind of huge additional inspection when people are juggling so many balls and working in and basically firefighting a lot of the time, have we got enough staff to even teach today, to provide the education, to then say, right, we're going to come in and do a Mockstead or a huge QA or a huge monitoring evaluation thing. I don't know why you would do that to your staff. I just don't know why you would do it. I understand that everything needs to develop and to move on, and obviously there needs to be coaching and mentoring available because people's professional development doesn't stand still. But to actually say we're going to come in and we're going to do like a department-wide Mockstead or a school-wide Mockstead, whilst you're remote teaching, whilst you're dealing with all these COVID secure procedures, whilst you don't know how many kids you're having in there and you've got staggered starts and this, that and the other.
I know, it's odd, isn't it? it's
That's
funny.
bonkers.
It's funny that because it's interesting to me that you refer to Motstead and a lot, several times there, but it's never a phrase that I hear or use, and it's because I'm sort of like I have sort of like fairly bad, so sort of links with the informal inspection process at Ofsted, and so I never talk about it, never use it, I never refer to the framework in any of my work, never.
Yeah.
And so I kind of it's sort of, but I have still been invited into a couple of places to go and help them with some stuff like looking at lessons and stuff. So why is that all right? Now, what's happened there is where I've been in so far, it's been sort of, it's so uninspectorial. So what I do is I'm writing something up which is just to help them, and no one sees it but them. And they, even like, so for example, a couple of weeks ago, I was at a school up in Durham, and I walked around the science department with the head of science. And it was great for he was being made in a way to do the thing he loves doing, which is to see his teachers in action and think about their practice. But because I was there, it was like he could then talk about it, and then he was then talking to his team, and it was like a good, a nice collaborative sort of feel to it. But it would be wrong to pretend that wasn't a quality assurance process, because I was sort of looking at what he was saying. He was looking at what his teachers were doing. We were feeding back to the head. We were discussing. So there is a QA element, but it was done in a spirit which is genuinely trying to help things improve. And I don't know if that's, I don't think, and I was quite encouraged. They're still doing it now in COVID time.
I mean, there is the element of, you need to know your school. You need to know what's going on in your school. You need to have a flavour for what's working well, what's not going particularly well. And that still needs to carry on. And also staff still have that entitlement to have their professional skills and knowledge developed. There still needs to be that investment in staff. We can't just run people into the ground at the skill level that they're at the moment and pretend that they don't need to grow as a professional just because of what we're doing in a pandemic. But I think we need to be incredibly aware of the type of QA activities we'd be doing, the impact that they would be having on the staff, and also the purpose of it. Why are you actually doing this? Is it because you feel ill prepared for an inspection that's potentially looming? Is it because you genuinely want to develop your staff with teaching and learning? And just being really clear about, the biggest resource you have in your school are your staff and your teachers, and putting onerous additional QA, I would say experiences, but kind of activities on the top of what they're already doing. If that's not actually going to benefit them and move their practice forward and help them make their job easier and more efficient and effective, then I don't know why anybody would do them at the moment.
No, I agree, and especially if it can add extra workload. So one of the things I think works well is that you use existing structures to do it. So let's say if you look at, say, book scrutiny, like even in non-COVID sort of constrained times, that has been in some places been turned into an absolute nightmare of heavy-handedness. So hand in your books, then there's a whole pile of books on the tables, and people are looking at them, even like filling in sheets, typing out reports to the teacher about the standard of their books. Then the teacher has to have some time to look at that, and then it's, oh my God. And this whole thing of them getting ready for their books to be looked at is stressful. Mm-hmm. Whereas what can work really well, totally different from that, is the regular time, which is the meeting time. We're going to meet anyway. We bring our books, we open them up together as a team, and we look at each other's work and we say, what's working, what are the students? And this is like a discussion we're having together while we're there about the things that our students, our kids are doing. And it's a collaborative sharing of practice in the time we will be using anyway. No extra workload, and it's not being sort of top down. It's like a professional discussion. And I think those are the things which work better anyway. So why not just keep it to that type of approach rather than anything which feels remotely inspectorial?
I know somebody who wrote about checking in, not checking up, Tom.
I believe that's you. It's a great phrase. Checking in, not checking up.
Yeah, and that's
Emma Turner. She said it in the toddler book.
Oh,
I think you've done a whole bit on this show about that before, I think. But But it's the culture, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's even more so now that people need to be checked in with more than checked up on, because people are grappling with so many different aspects of their practice now. They're having to adapt, be so agile. They're having to move a lot of their practice from physical, in the room, present work to online or blended learning, and they are learning an incredible amount. And to then put historical QA systems over what is a state of professional flux doesn't do anybody any favours at the moment, I think.
I think one of the things that's sort of easy to say and hard to do when you're under pressure is to say something like, you shouldn't be Ofsted driven, you shouldn't be preparing for inspections, you should just be running a good school and Ofsted will come. And I just think, if you've ever been battered by Ofsted, that's a high risk strategy, because you think, yeah, I don't like being battered by people who come and visit. So you know what? I believe what you're saying in principle, but because of the system is the way it is, I kind of feel like, yikes, I still want to get ready. And that's a horrible culture. But in a way, as a school, you can't change the system. When you're in a more positive situation, you shouldn't be making things more stressful than they are on other people's behalf. Something else I was going to raise about this is just sort of, it is the spirit with people. One of the things I think is the acid test of a QA kind of culture in a school is, do people like being observed or not? And if people actually are really happy to be observed, in fact, they seek it out and they like the feedback conversations, that shows you their spirit is good. But if observation is like, observation, da, 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 you know the culture's wrong. You know, it's like, that it shouldn't feel like that way.
No, one of the things that breaks my heart is when you go into a school and people are going, good luck with your observation, good luck. Luck? Why do you need good luck? What's going to happen if it doesn't go to plan? Oh my goodness.
Exactly.
But
what I think, just so there's so many issues here which are the same, a bit like with the exams. There's those of which are the same regardless of the COVID. The one thing I'm encouraged by, and I am encouraged by it, is schools sort of groundedness. They're just getting on with things. And what I've seen definitely true, even evidence in the fact that people are sort of buying CPD materials that I'm producing and stuff more than before, is because people want to get on with it. They don't want to be feeling like their entire life is defined by, you know, masks and 2 meter exclusion zones. They want to be getting on with the real thing. And I actually think that kind of business as usual psychology is impressive when people are managing to deliver that, and lots of people are.
And it's because they're teachers, Tom, and teachers are always trying to improve their practice, and it doesn't matter what situation you put a teacher into, they'll always find something to reflect on, something to evaluate, something to move the practice forward. It's no, and it's no different. And I think the fact that we've had to be so agile and so nimble in changing the way that we work, it's actually thrown up loads more opportunities for people to network, to read, to work in a different way and to try things out. And I think a lot of people have seen the potential for change as well, and we've kind of embraced a lot of that. And it's heartening to see that the people that are leading learning in our school are still continuing to drive their own professional learning, even during even during the pandemic. So I'm blown away by it.
There's some good programs being developed as well. So let's look on this. So within all of this, I mean, we talk about CPD and stuff a lot, but I think it's always linked to the QA there. But what about head teachers? I mean, you know a lot of head teachers, so do I. I believe you've had. If we were prompted to talk about the pressure they're under, we've had a letter, haven't we? Tell people about that.
Yeah, I've got a letter from a very experienced head teacher. Very well respected head teacher, exceptional practitioner. And I asked them, what's it like at the minute for heads? So if you were going to describe it, and they wrote me a letter, and it's quite long, so I'm going to sit back, relax. I'm going to read you this letter. It's fairly long, because I think it just flags up quite a lot of points. And don't get me wrong, this person is the most devoted professional you will ever meet. They are very positive about the profession as a whole. They enjoy their job. This is not a complaint letter. This is meant to be painting a picture of current reality for a lot of head teachers. So I'll read it out. Many heads have not stopped since March. They've worked relentlessly for 7 months non-stop through Easter, May half term and much of the summer without a break. Many secondary heads had to navigate the fiasco presented by A-level results day in August and the subsequent examination U-turn regarding GCSE grades. Then there was the poor handling of BTECs. All heads were then presented with a late night DFE announcement on bank holiday before returning to school in anticipation of the new academic year. Some schools were already back, for example in Leicestershire, with next to no notice to implement key changes to the DFE guidance that was presented to them at the last minute. Heads have now spent 6 to 8 weeks running schools under a COVID cloud, which has placed an intolerable weight of pressure, stress and strain on many. Parental complaints have surged in a way never seen before due to the stress of COVID. Heads are now navigating keeping their schools open, mitigating the risks posed by COVID, responding to daily COVID concerns, having to devise remote learning plans, create catch-up fund plans, and maintaining a smiley face to ensure staff morale doesn't plummet. In the background is the possibility of an Ofsted-friendly visit, which adds another weight of pressure and strain to any senior leader, coupled with having to deal with daily issues such as, will we have any staff to deliver the curriculum today? What's being done to actually support heads? How is the welfare and well-being of head teachers being monitored and supported? What actual slack are heads being cut? Add to this the Eden Red free school meals voucher scheme and the laptops for the disadvantaged that didn't appear until the last minute. Plus a need now to ensure all pupils have connectivity and a device if remote learning is actually to succeed. Plus we still don't really know anything about accountability for pupil attendance, staff attendance and results. And I've also not added in behaviour. Many schools have been faced with pupil behaviour that's worse than ever before, real defiance. So now you need a new behaviour annex and a safeguarding annex to your policies that are COVID focused. I'd actually say a critical storm is brewing.
It's just extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, and we rely on the fact that, I mean, one of the things my observation has been that in the face of sort of chaotic government announcements and policy making, what head teachers are delivering by and large is just awesome. Just what they've managed to do. And of course, I mean, I was in a school last week where they told me how back in March, April, they started off doing this with the online learning. Then by May it was this, then it was June. They've learned so many things along the way. And so now, you know, they say by the end, we worked out kind of what was working and what wasn't. So there's a learning curve, which is massive. And now they're kind of like on it and they realized, and I just think that's exactly what you do. You just get on with it. It's the same with all these classrooms with tape at the front and zoning, and different schools with incredibly sophisticated bubble systems. And I think it's amazing. I mean, we could sit here just sort of saying how amazing heads are for which we,
yeah. But I don't think until you actually see those things listed like that, one after the other, almost like a chronology of chaos, that you actually realise what they've achieved either.
Yeah.
Every little thing, they're not little, but every item on there has been either a huge Twitter storm where, you know, heads have been amazing, supporting each other, sharing documents, ideas, you know, all sorts of things. But the cumulative effect of every single one of those and the potential it has to erode someone's physical, mental, emotional resources, their confidence in their ability to do a job, that is huge, because that is happening to tens of thousands of individual head teachers across the country who are battling to keep the schools open, to keep staff morale high, with little to no guidance or support. I think it's not enough to go, oh, aren't they marvellous, they've just done really well. It needs to be kind of shouted from the rooftops that, oh my God, look what they've actually achieved.
Yeah.
There's been no head teacher with a platform large enough to actually say, if I list all of this and go through this, look what we've had to do, and still educate all the children, keep the staff safe. You haven't moved the exam goalposts. You know, we're constantly in this state of reaction when actually school leaders are the most organised, proactive and kind of strategic people you will ever meet. To have to shelve that and be reactive to all of that, it's immensely wrong footing for school leaders. And
what do you think? I think there's a recognition. I think what we need to be conscious of is kind of in the accountability kind of culture that is.
Yeah.
So if I was I mean, to be honest, the schools that I've got the closest contact with, the governing bodies are doing what they're supposed to, as far as I can see. That they have recognised that, and I think they have a duty to, like, if I was a governor of a school, I think there's a duty to know, like, for example, imagine if you're in a school where, compared with like nearly everybody else, your online provision was really poor. I mean, that might be the case, and you'd need to be able to kind of ask questions which are saying, oh, what are we doing? And it could be that your COVID response has been not very good either. So when you're a governor, you've got this dilemma of, I do need to know that it's being done well. I do need to know that, but at the same time, I need to rely on this person to do it. And without them, we're stuffed.
They are the most vulnerable person in the school in terms of being, because they are, unless you're in a co-headship, you are the only person doing that job. Everybody is either less senior than you and doesn't carry the can, or they are your kind of manager in terms of being like the chair of governors or the board or whatever. You are totally on your own. And Sue Bull, who runs an amazing coach, runs a coaching course, talks about head teachers being vulnerable because they are lone workers. They are the only person in that organisation doing that job, which makes them immensely vulnerable because they are a lone worker. They've got nobody necessarily to sympathise, empathise, have a sounding board.
Yeah.
And I'm co-chair of governors at my children's school, and as a standing agenda item on the governor meeting is head teacher welfare, because it's, we recognise that the well-being of the head teacher, managing their workload, managing, their well-being is absolutely fundamental to the effective running of a school. And, head teachers can't just be the fall guy for everything. They are ultimately humans first.
I think there's some organic stuff. One of my conclusions from being a head is that I've had several chairs of governors, some who I had a strong personal relationship with than others, and a different levels of pressure and stress and success and failure. And my conclusion, sort of averaging out from all of that, is that as a head teacher, my biggest advice to anyone starting out was find somebody who you respect, who you can talk to openly and honestly, including all of your worst fears, who isn't someone you're married to because you can't offload everything on them, and isn't your chair of governors, because they at the end of the day, while you're admitting your fears and failures to them, they have to judge that. They have to think, almost don't want to hear that level of honesty. They need to feel confident in you, and you can't just offload to them. It's dangerous. They'll end up sacking you using the information you've given them if they have to, because you've been too honest with them. And I think that's real. I mean, I know lots of people who've had that experience. If you've ever been sacked, you know that you can't trust your chair of governors with your most deep fears, because they're not the right person to share that with. They can't, it's not fair on them almost to be told those things. You need a barrier, you need a buffer. And I did have a couple of people, but I didn't see them often enough. And also I think I was too in awe of them because I tried to copy them in a ways which was impossible. It's almost like
bad tribute act.
Well, kind of, yeah. I would say, like, why can't I do what you do? It's just not, it's hard. But I do think this thing of, like, even somebody writing a letter and offloading, like that feeling of having someone you can tell, but you have to be someone you can tell your worries up to with no consequences, because and sometimes baggage, I know what it's like when people offload. It's you have to receive that and be able to go, and that has to not affect you too much.
One of the greatest strengths of the co-headship that I worked in was that we weren't lone workers.
Yeah, amazing.
And that we had that. We could say at the door to whoever was there, yeah, leave it with us, that's fine. Shut the door and go, oh, God, what are we going to do? But because there was two of us, we were in it together. You were never alone. And had I been a lone head, I would have needed to do what you've said, which was to find the coach, the mentor, the counsellor, whoever it is, to share that with, because you cannot be that one person who bottles it all up and carries the can for everybody. At the end of the day, you're a very skilled professional, incredibly knowledgeable, massively skilled, but you're also a person. Things hurt, things make you tired, things make you angry, things make you upset. You've got to find those people that you can share that with.
It's hard, isn't it, to be that genuine equal. So, well, like when you're, I'd say it's one of the things I miss more than anything from being a head is having a team. I love that, and I love working with those people and nurturing people. In fact, I'd say now I'm thinking of 3 people specifically now who are heads that used to be my deputy, who were way better at the job than I ever was. Like you could tell that straight away. Like I was thinking, I feel like you should be doing this job, not me, because you're way better at it than I am. And that's definitely true. Now you should see them. They're just, all 3 of them that I'm thinking of are amazing.
Tom, there is an argument that leaders create new leaders. So
but I could champion them, but I felt always a bit of a barrier from saying, look, let me just unload my rubbish onto you. So I feel for all these head teachers. I see it in some of the stuff they're outpouring on Twitter and stuff. I think it's hard. At the same time, I think where people have got, like one person I know, she has an amazing team around her. They do create a kind of team spirit, and that's great. But also she has a good group of governors who just give her space to be herself, and she enjoys that. But I know other people where it's just like constant pressure, like, get off my back. The governors always, they mention the governors every time I meet them. The most immediate source of pressure is from the governing body. And I just think, that is your fault, those governors. What do you want? Who do you want? You want blood out of people.
Governance is a critical friend, but you can't just do the critical bit.
No.
And get the best out of people and an organisation. Neither can you just do the friend bit and get the best out of a person or an organisation. Our governors at my school when I was in headship, oh my goodness, they're the most supportive, wonderful group of intelligent, innovative, warm-hearted, kind people. And they were instrumental in restructuring the school, moving the school forward. And Claire and I couldn't have made the progress that we made without some of the decisions that they made. And they were sometimes the people that we did confide in and, say, we're really worried about this. And they would help to support you through that process. But there are other governors and governing bodies that I know that just take it as like they're a constant Ofsted inspection.
Yeah, no, it's weird, isn't it? I think sometimes it's the language. I love it when governors talk about us, like, what are we doing? What's our strategy? How are our finances? Because you feel like we're in this together, and we put a face forward. But I've also been in other situations where people are sort of saying, tell me about and it's like, well, you've said you rather than like not us, like we're separate. Anyway, well, I think we'd all respect this. I mean, if you're in a responsibility position where you are responsible for a head teacher and supporting them, like if you're a parent, balance out those messages, ask questions, but don't complain, don't moan. One of the things I find kind of sickening actually is when people publicly criticize their child's school on Twitter, even when they're a teacher or working in the profession. I just think, why are you doing that? Why are you publicly criticizing your child's school online? It's kind of, how dare you do that? Like, if you've got an issue with them, then deal with it privately, but the impact that has on that school. We talked about this before. It's so wrong. And that head teacher who's receiving that knows about that. Of course they do, especially if you've got lots of followers. You shouldn't be doing it. So I can get quite annoyed about that.
But I do think now is a critical time for heads to reach out and to build supportive networks, and things like engaging with coaching. For example, like through Women Ed with the coaching pledge, where people can access free coaching. I think there's never been more of a time when school leaders need to connect with each other, just to kind of
solidarity,
but also for support. And there have been some hugely generous sharing of resources, of plans, of things that have been drawn up in schools. And I think that just goes to show that there's such a degree of altruism out there within head teachers. But unfortunately, there are some still head teachers that are being kind of cut adrift and sailing as a lone ship. And I think that they've got to connect with other heads and other
definitely
trusts, because no one person is going to be able to weather this on their own. I just don't. I think it's too big. And if
I
you look
totally agree.
from that letter, what head teachers have managed to achieve already is staggering, absolutely staggering. And by reading the news and everything, it's not stopping anytime soon. We're not getting to what we were before in the, you know, in
So
the
look,
very near future.
if you're in a school and your teachers at a session where you know they're meeting other head teachers, just give them the space to do that. Like, they need that, that they're not going there except because they need to be there, and because that is important for everybody. So I think we should just say a huge thank you to everyone doing this job. It's amazing what people do, and I hope the person who wrote to us feels the support that they comes their way. Okay, well, look, I think that's time for us to finish there. We've had lots of discussions, so many things going on. It's the most incredible, crazy time in education, and it will continue to be. Thank you very much to everybody for listening to this episode, and we hope you enjoy the other interviews. Most recently, of course, with Mary Myatt, and before that with Mark McCourt and so many others before. So listening on the podcast, listen to all the previous episodes, or watching on YouTube. Thank you for joining us. Mind the Gap. Thank you.